Welcome to the Take Action Podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Simmons, here to help you take massive action to being your best self. Many people don't believe in their own potential and don't always have the courage to change their situation. Join me and other guests as we give you practical ways to releasing your potential so that you can be your best self. Now let's stop playing and take action. What's up, y'all? It's Nicole here, and welcome to another episode of the Take Action Podcast show. And I'm excited about this episode because I thought that I would come on here and have a conversation with you and I together, kind of pause on inviting some guests to the table and just share a little bit about the premise behind what we're talking about for this entire theme for this season, and that is freedom. And I wanted to share a little bit about what that freedom means to me. And maybe as you are hearing what I'm saying, you can identify for yourself in your own life what freedom means to you and the depths and the levels of freedom that you are going through. So I started off just kind of planning this series several months ago. I always take the time to really get quiet and really think about what it is that is in my heart to really bring forth through this podcast. And so the word freedom was it resonated with me because several months ago, I was kind of at a crossroads where, for some of you that may not know, I started bodybuilding a couple of years ago. And I was in the middle of preparing for my next competition. And I was having a really, really difficult time with focusing mentally and getting through some of the struggles that I was facing to prepare for the competition. And I couldn't really understand where the struggle was coming from. And I had several conversations on and off with my coach, and I just kind of pushed through it and just took it as, this is a part of what happens when you're preparing, your body mentally, physically, spiritually, getting in a space where you have to be aligned to put yourself through a level of discipline. And so I was going through that and also preparing for this season. And I was thinking about really what I really wanted to bring forth. And the word freedom just kept on resonating. And I didn't really understand what it was going to be about, but I just kept on hearing that word, not knowing that freedom was the very thing that I actually needed to lean into myself in order to make some decisions in my life at that time. And so, as I shared, I was kind of struggling with, preparing for a competition. And I also found that I was kind of struggling with my work outside of, being a fitness enthusiast and bodybuilder competitor. I'm also a personal growth and leadership coach. I work with nonprofits and for-profit organizations with team building, with their leadership, and doing workshops, virtual presentations, in-person trainings around those topics. And I found myself really struggling with my work. I was, just to be fully transparent, I was forgetting, I would set up coaching sessions and I would, type in, I have a scheduler, I would type in the wrong time. I would mix up time zones. I would be late to some of my coaching sessions because I wasn't managing myself properly. I felt really disconnected inwardly, and it was showing up in my work. It was showing up in my fitness journey, my competition prep. Y'all, it was showing up in my relationship, in my marriage. And it was showing up in kind of every area. It was showing up in my home. I just couldn't seem to get organized the way that I wanted to. I just couldn't I couldn't get a rhythm. Have you ever been in a place where you just couldn't find that rhythm? It's just it feels like you're always catching up. You're either late for something, you're preparing for something, or you don't have it all together. That's where I was. And, there's freedom in that, right? There's freedom in being able to share and be able to say, you know what, I didn't have it all together, or I don't have it all together. And this is what needs to happen. And so I found myself in that space, in that place. And it was very frustrating, extremely frustrating. And I remember one time I was listening to a mentor talk about frustration. And I loved his perspective about frustration. He was like, frustration is not a bad thing. Frustration is a signal that something needs to change, and I didn't always embrace that perspective. I would see frustration as something is wrong and I need to, not necessarily it needs to change, but I just need to get away from it, not lean into it and figure out what are the changes that need to be made. But I found myself utterly frustrated. And I don't know if you are frustrated where you are right now, or you feel like you're disjointed, or you just don't have a rhythm that's flowing for you. That's exactly where I was. And this word of freedom came to my mind as I'm in the midst of all of this. And I was trying to figure out, what does that mean? Why do I have this word freedom that is just resonating within my mind when I'm waking up in the morning, when I'm praying? It's just this word freedom. And when I think I was driving one day and finally was like, okay, all right, Lord, what does this word mean? What does freedom mean? And I heard so very clearly, kind of that small voice on the inside for me say, you need to experience freedom for yourself. And then I want you to invite other people to talk about freedom. So I needed to experience freedom for myself. And I didn't really know what that meant. Like, what freedom? I needed to be free from the expectations of other people, because I was carrying what I thought others wanted from me, or what others expected from me. And I was taking that on as my own and trying to live up to that. And it was causing me to be discombobulated, disjointed, unfocused, just a mess, just a mess. And I don't know if you've ever taken on expectations that were other people's expectations, but you were trying to live up to those expectations in different areas of your life. And for me, I was trying to live up to expectations in all of those areas, in my work as an entrepreneur, as a coach, in my relationship, in my marriage, with my fitness journey, with my fitness coach. Like, I was trying to, in my mind, I thought they had these certain expectations of me, and I was trying to live up to these expectations. And so I was not experiencing freedom, because I was jailed, if you will. I was in a cage to others' expectations. And it wasn't something necessarily that they said, you have to do this or you have to do that. It was the mental battle that I had conjured in my own mind, thinking, this is what they want from me. This is what I think they want. And so I'm trying to live up to what other people want, what other people are expecting, instead of listening to the true desires that were in my own mind, in my own heart, and going after that. And so after a process, I had some really great conversations with my husband, who is like a confidant to me. I also had a conversation with my therapist, who is amazing. And I had some conversations with God. And all three of those conversations were kind of lined up to the central point that I needed to honor the desires that were on the inside of me and be free to do that, letting go of expectations and lean into the freedom of what I truly desired. And when I was able to do that, I experienced what freedom really feels like for myself at this stage and at this age of my life. And you might be in that same place. Maybe you're in a place where you're experiencing a level of frustration. You're feeling disjointed because you are carrying the expectations of other people, Not necessarily things that they have stated. Maybe they have, maybe they haven't. But in your own mind, you think that you have to live up to what someone else thinks you should be doing or the direction that you think they want you to go. So you're trying to live up to that. And I'm saying for you today, as we are talking about freedom, is being free from that, is being able to lean into what it is, what's the true desires that are in your heart? What are the things that keep coming to mind for you that are very strong and that you are pushing aside and trying to uphold what you think somebody else thinks you should be doing? That's where the internal conflict is coming from. That's where the frustration hits. And right, who wants to live in that state all the time? It's very mentally draining to try to feel like you have to live up to other people's expectations. But true freedom comes when you can be bold enough and courageous enough to lean into your own desires. And can I tell you something about the desires that are in you, that are for you? They're good enough. Those desires in you are good enough. The things that the direction that you're supposed to go in, the things that you're supposed to bring out from within, they are good enough. And they will be successful as long as you stay on the path and do those action steps that are necessary to bring those things to fruition, right? And so I was able to experience freedom, and freedom came because I had laid down and said, no, I am no longer going to serve those expectations. I am now going to lean into those desires. And when I was able to do that and then have some conversations that were very difficult conversations to have, because let's face it, I don't know about you, but this is me. I don't like to feel like I let people down when I say I'm going to do something and then that's not really what I wanted to do in the first place. I just said yes because I felt like that's what I was supposed to do. Well, I don't also like to go behind and have the conversation and say, you know what, I'm really not going to do A, B, or C. I'm really going to do this because originally this is what I really wanted to do. And that leads me to talk about, this path of freedom, to be able to be honest with ourselves and being honest with those that we have relationships with, or things that we're involved in that involve other people. Freedom comes when you can be honest and have honest conversations. And it's not always easy to do because sometimes that might adjust the relationship when you're honest. Let's just face it. We don't live in a society that really honors and values honesty. We live in a society where if you're honest about something, I'm not saying rude. I didn't say rude. I said honest. And you can be honest with intention, and you can be honest being direct, but with compassion, right? We live in a society that doesn't necessarily honor that. And we live in this climate where honesty is taken as I'm judging you, or honesty is taken as being critical or criticizing. And don't get me wrong, sometimes the way that, we communicate with one another, sure, it can be perceived that way. But when you are coming from a genuine, authentic place, it's really important to be honest and to share what your true desires are, because there is freedom in that. And I have learned through this whole freedom, talking about freedom and having this series about freedom, that freedom, there's levels to freedom. It's not just one level where, okay, I feel free in this area. I feel free that I don't have to live by others' expectations. I can now, really pursue the true desires in my heart and go forward. That's one level. But then there's another level of freedom where you can be honest with yourself and with others. And then there's another level of freedom where you can be transparent. And then there's another level of freedom where you can be intimate. And there's another level of freedom. There's levels to freedom, because as we do the work on ourselves, our own personal growth journeys, we discover that we're like onions, and you keep peeling off the layers and you go deeper, you go deeper, you go deeper. there are things that you discover about yourself. There are things that you discover about life, and you can apply the freedom principles to these things. And one freedom principle that we can apply is the law of consistency. And I love that. I love the law. I love this law. And it's a freedom principle because when we are consistent to be honest with ourselves, when we are consistent to lean into those desires that are really for us, when we are consistent to be transparent, so forth and so on, then we begin to experience we expand our capacity. I'm going to say we expand our capacity for freedom, to be free in other areas. And so going through that process a couple of months ago led me through a series of different decisions that got me to a place where I sit now, where I am experiencing a deeper level, another level of freedom to be able to come on here on this podcast and say, hey, you know what? I was disjointed. I did feel like, everything was not firing off. I didn't feel aligned spiritually, mentally, emotionally, like I was all over the place. And it took really sitting and listening and praying and having the honest conversations. And, yes, I did seek therapy because I believe that when we have a multitude of wise counsel around us, people that can provide wisdom for us and help us process through things, then it helps us to achieve different levels of freedom that we want to achieve. And for me, as a woman of faith, I know that, my relationship with God, my relationship with Christ, has given me freedom, and sometimes we don't walk in that. I haven't walked in the fullness of that freedom because of not even utilizing the resources around me to be able to experience that freedom, if that makes any sense. And so this whole freedom series, was centered around some of the things that I shared with you earlier about where I was in my life. And I needed to experience that freedom and then have a platform where other people can come on and talk about different aspects of freedom as well. And so whenever, in terms of the podcast, whenever I have, these conversations, I usually get, themes for every season. And I have discovered through podcasting itself and having conversations, inviting guests on, that this podcast is also a growth area for me, where I'll get themes and different words that will come to me, or acronyms or something like that. And it's something that I need to experience. And then I either bring on other guests or have conversations myself and bring it here to the platform so that you can also experience that as well, or bring perspective, or maybe it's an enlightenment for you as well. The purpose and the goal of this podcast is really to help you be the best version of yourself, to overcome those self-doubts, to move past stagnation, to not be stagnant in your potential, to continue to grow your potential, all of these areas so that you can be the best version of yourself. And so I just wanted to come on here, a little pause from inviting other guests on, and talk about what that freedom has looked like for me and why we are doing this freedom series. My hope and my prayer for you is that you will continue to go from one level of freedom to the next level of freedom, to the next level of freedom in your life, as you are honest with what the desires that you hold, and that you lean into them, that you bring them out, that you take the necessary action steps to walk in that direction, and that you utilize the wisdom, those people around you that can help give you the support and the insight so that you can continue to be honest, transparent, and go after what those desires are and experience another level of freedom. So I hope this encouraged you today. And I want you to continue to listen in. Next week, we'll be back with another episode. And I think y'all are going to like this episode. So stay tuned for that. And just take one step. What can you do? What is that one thing that you can do to experience freedom in your life. Continue to like, share, and share a review about this podcast. Follow me on Instagram at Take Action Podcast. I would love to hear your feedback. And thank you so much for being a great listener and for sharing us with your friends. Until next time, we'll see you. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to Take Action Podcast. I truly hope you were inspired to take massive action to being your best self. If this resonated with you, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a beat. And write a review so we can share this message with as many people as possible. Head over to my hub, NicoleSimmonsLeadership.com, for more powerful resources to help you release your potential. Make today count, take action.